The Galactic Empire had ruled for over 3,000 years, worlds burned and bent at its will. From the frozen moons of Vorath to the lava-skinned planets of the Callan Rift, the Empire's grip was absolute. Entire species had submitted, some voluntarily, others after bloody, brutal campaigns. But never Earth. Earth was considered a backwater, a primitive planet dangling in the Milky Way, too far from the Imperial core to be seen as anything but a minor annoyance. When humanity refused the first envoy's demands to kneel, the Empire sent warships. They never returned. Reports came back garbled, filled with static and brief flashes of horror. Imperial dreadnoughts torn apart mid-warp, fleets ambushed in asteroid fields that shouldn't have even existed, soldiers whispering of ghosts in power armor. Then, silence. Emperor Calderon dismissed it as technical failure, or perhaps the handiwork of one of the rogue systems. Earth wasn't even part of the star charts until recently. Surely it couldn't pose a threat. Not when entire planets fell at the mere sight of the Imperial crest. But the silence grew louder. So Calderon sent Admiral Shurek, one of his most ruthless commanders, to resolve the human problem. A man known for massacres, for ending rebellions before they ever began. He arrived at the Sol system with 27 battleships, 5 carriers, and 100,000 soldiers. He made it as far as Mars. What came next would haunt the Empire's core forever. The first signs of trouble weren't Earth's weapons. They were their absence. No planetary defense grids, no orbital mines, no energy shields, nothing. The Empire expected a quick win. Maybe a few rebellious outposts firing old tech. But as the Imperial forces entered Mars' orbit and prepared to descend, every ship lost contact at once. Within 2 hours, Mars was under human control. The only broadcast the Empire received was a live video feed from one of their own dropships. A human, in torn combat gear with dried blood on his cheek, stared into the camera. His eyes were cold, calculated. "You sent your best," he said. "That was cute." He turned slightly, revealing a line of human soldiers standing behind him. Some wore armor patched together with scavenged alien tech. Others carried rifles that glowed with eerie, humming cores, clearly not standard human issue. "We're the scouts," the man said. "Just a warm-up squad." He leaned forward, grinning like a predator. "The real army hasn't even arrived yet." And then the feed cut out. Across the galaxy, noble houses panicked. Military strategists scrambled to understand what they had just seen. Earth, this undeveloped planet, hadn't just resisted. It had annihilated, cleanly, quietly. No messy rebellions, no drawn-out sieges, just gone. But how? The question echoed through the High Council like a virus no one could cure. On Earth, deep beneath the surface of Alaska's Black Mountains, General Aria Morgan stood in front of a massive hollow table. Her officers surrounded her, silent and waiting. She was known as the Ice Queen, a legend within the Phantom Division, Earth's covert planetary defense force. Her voice was calm, but carried weight. "The Empire's starting to notice," she said. One of the officers, Captain Ramos, frowned. "Think they'll send more?" Aria looked straight at him. "They always send more." She turned to the table, where dozens of red dots lit up one after another, indicating incoming fleets. "Time to wake the sleepers," she said. "Let the real army know it's their turn." Somewhere in deep cryo, thousands of enhanced soldiers began to stir. Earth's real defenders. Soldiers engineered for war in ways the Empire couldn't fathom. Trained in virtual arenas where they killed gods, not men. The Galactic Empire thought Earth was playing defense. They had no idea Earth had been waiting for this war. The Empire wasn't built on fear. It was built on control. But fear was now seeping through the cracks of that control, like poison gas in a sealed chamber. In the Imperial War Room on Ziricon Prime, Grand Strategist Velen paced in tight, controlled steps. Holograms of destroyed ships blinked in red above the table, vessels from the Mars operation gone without a trace. His fingers trembled slightly, a rare show of emotion for a man known as the brain of the Empire. "We underestimated them," he muttered. General Koresh, a brute of a man in obsidian black armor, scoffed. "They're primitives. They're not capable of this without help." "Do you see any other flags flying on Mars?" Velen snapped back. "No other species has claimed responsibility. No political movements, no pirated tech. This wasn't sabotage. It was war. And Earth just won the first round." Emperor Calderon didn't speak. He sat on his throne of living metal, carved from the bones of extinct rulers, eyes scanning the footage again. The human soldier's grin echoed in his mind. That confidence wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. "I want Earth glassed," the Emperor finally said. "Every city, every mountain. I want the soil screaming." The room fell silent. "Sir," Velen said carefully, "what if that's what they want?" Calderon turned his cold gaze on him. "Explain." Velen tapped a command into the holo table. "We've seen this before, in ancient wars. When a force wants you to strike with everything, it's because they've set the trap. What happened on Mars was surgical. They didn't destroy the ships from orbit. They let them land. Then they took them." Koresh scoffed again. "You're saying humans lured us in, took our ships and soldiers without a trace, and sent a message to mock us? I'm saying we have no clue what we're dealing with." Back on Earth, General Aria Morgan stood in the underground chamber known as the Core. Around her, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. The walls were lined with cryopods, thousands of them, each housing a different kind of warrior. One by one, the pods opened with sharp hisses. Steam rose like ghosts. Men and women stepped out in silence, their eyes glowing faintly with biotech enhancements. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were phantoms, products of Earth's final war, forgotten by the public, erased from history, and trained for a fight that was never supposed to come. Until now. Colonel Dex Rowan stretched as he stepped from his pod, muscles tightening like coiled wire. His left arm was cybernetic, a relic from the AI wars. His right eye flickered with a tactical HUD as he scanned the room. "Did we miss the apocalypse?" he asked with a crooked grin. "No," Aria said, folding her arms. "It's just beginning." Rowan looked around at the others, stirring from sleep. "Why now?" "The Empire's getting bold," she replied. "And stupid." Rowan's grin widened. "I like stupid enemies." In the outer systems, the Second Imperial Fleet was already on the move. 50 battleships, 10 planet killers, hundreds of interceptors, enough firepower to reduce a solar system to ash. Admiral Viren commanded the fleet, and he was a man of cruelty masked by discipline. He didn't fear Earth. Not yet. But as his ships approached Jupiter's orbit, something strange happened. His forward scouts disappeared. No warning, no distress signal, just gone. Then the communications system crackled to life. Static. Then a voice. Human. "You're early," the voice said. "We were hoping for more of a challenge." The transmission ended, but it left something behind. Coordinates. A single location on Ganymede. A trap? Definitely. But Viren smirked. "We're the Empire," he growled. "Let them set all the traps they want." Back at Earth's command bunker, Aria stood over the same hollow table the Empire had unknowingly mimicked. "They took the bait," her tech officer confirmed. "Viren's fleet is on course for Ganymede." "Good," Aria said. "Let's see if they can swim in our waters." From Earth's core, Silos opened silently beneath oceans and forests. Stealth ships shaped like predators rose from hidden bases on Neptune. AIs awakened with combat protocols stored in quantum memory. They had been quiet, patient. Now they were hungry, because the real army hadn't even arrived yet, and Earth was done waiting. Admiral Viren stood at the helm of the Imperial flagship Vindicator, his posture stiff, his arms folded behind his back. The fleet loomed just outside Ganymede's shadow, formations tight and precise. Ships the size of cities hung in space, bristling with weapons capable of vaporizing continents. In his mind, this was overkill, but orders were orders. The Emperor wanted a message sent. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling crawling beneath his skin. No resistance, no defensive lines, no human ships in sight. "This is wrong," his lieutenant muttered, eyes on the sensor grid. "Keep scanning," Viren snapped. "If they're hiding, we'll burn them out." But the scan returned nothing but silence. No heat signatures, no life signs, not even satellites. Ganymede looked abandoned, until it blinked. Literally. The entire moon flickered, one massive pulse of energy, visible to the naked eye. And then the ground moved. Not like an earthquake, like machinery. The surface of Ganymede cracked into massive hexagonal plates, revealing what lay beneath. A black, mechanical construct the size of the moon itself. A weapon, dormant for who knew how long, now awakening. Red veins of energy pulsed across it, spiraling upward. It was like watching a god stretch after a long nap. Viren's mouth went dry. "What in the Emperor's name is that?" His officers scrambled for answers. "It's not natural." "Sir, that thing was buried inside the moon, possibly for centuries. It's not even on our archives." Another voice from the back added, "Sir, it's locking onto us." Viren's gut screamed at him to move. "All ships, fall back, now!" But it was already too late. The weapon on Ganymede let loose a single beam, thin, focused, and utterly silent. It sliced through space like it owned the place. The Vindicator's port-side escorts, 4 ships in perfect formation, were bisected in less than a second. No explosions, just vapor trails. Gone. Panic erupted. The fleet scattered, orders flying in every direction. Defensive shields were raised, evasive maneuvers initiated. But Earth's ancient tech wasn't something they were prepared for. It didn't play by the Empire's rules. It was fast, adaptive, alive. Because it wasn't just a weapon, it was a warning. Back on Earth, Aria Morgan watched the battle unfold in real time. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She simply nodded once. "Send in the echo units," she said. In a dark chamber deep within the Arctic vaults, hundreds of human soldiers geared up in silence. Echo units weren't ordinary fighters. They were ghosts, trained in zero-gravity warfare, equipped with exosuits that made them invisible to all known sensors. They were the first phase of Earth's real counterattack. As the Empire's fleet reeled from the chaos above Ganymede, Echo units launched silently from hidden stealth ships nestled in Saturn's rings. They drifted like shadows, unseen and undetected, boarding Imperial vessels without a sound. What followed wasn't war. It was a massacre. Whole command decks were found empty, the bodies of Imperial officers laid out neatly, throats slit with surgical precision. Engines were sabotaged from within. Life support systems failed with alarming synchrony. One by one, the ships went dark. Admiral Viren didn't know how to react. "Where the hell are they coming from?" His crew offered no answers, just terrified stares and half-choked reports. "We're being boarded, from inside the shield perimeter. We don't even see them until—" The officer's voice cut out, replaced by a gurgling sound, and then silence. Then, on every screen across the fleet, a new broadcast, the same human from Mars. He stood on the bridge of what had once been an Imperial cruiser, now claimed by Earth, blood on his armor. Calm eyes. "We told you," he said again. "The real army hasn't even arrived yet." And this time, he smiled like someone who knew what was coming next. At Imperial High Command, chaos reigned. Dozens of star systems began reporting sightings of human infiltration. Military installations disrupted. Communications blacked out. Entire supply fleets gone. Strategist Velen stared at the growing reports, hands shaking. "They've prepared for this. They've been preparing while we looked away." Korash was no longer scoffing. Calderon leaned forward on his throne. "So Earth wants a war." Velen's voice was barely a whisper. "No, Earth is the war." And it had just begun. The Empire's second fleet was gone. Not defeated, not retreating. Gone. Of the 50 warships that approached Ganymede, only one limped back into warp space, its engines flickering like dying embers. No distress call, no requests for aid, just silence. And a hull scorched with the same strange red energy that lit up Ganymede's machine core. Word spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Not through official channels, no, the Empire kept those under lock. But rumors traveled faster than light. On mining colonies, in pirate dens, even in the luxury chambers of the noble class, people whispered one name like it was a god or a curse. Earth. And beneath those whispers was a question no one dared to voice aloud. What happens when Earth stops defending and starts advancing? At the Phantom Division's Central Command, Aria Morgan watched a list of targets appear on the screen. Empire strongholds, supply depots, outposts critical to their galactic communication web. "Phase 2, she said. Colonel Dex Rowan stood beside her, his armor freshly polished, his cybernetic arm now loaded with an energy cannon stripped from a fallen Imperial captain. "We're not just fighting back now, are we?" Aria shook her head. "Number, we're cutting off their air." Operation Echoburn began quietly, an assassin in the dark rather than a full frontal assault. Human strike teams deployed to 27 Imperial systems simultaneously. They didn't destroy cities. They destroyed infrastructure, communications, fuel depots, warp beacons. Within days, the Empire's galactic coordination fractured like a shattered mirror. And still, Earth had not sent a single full army deployment. On the Empire's capital planet of Zelanthia, Emperor Calderon no longer sat on his throne. He stood, pacing, eyes bloodshot and wild. Around him, his war council whispered like children afraid of a storm. "They're bleeding us without showing their hand," Velen said. "This isn't just tactical, it's personal." Calderon slammed his fist on the war table, cracking its surface. "Then make it personal. I want their cities burning. I want Earth to feel what it's like to lose something." Velen didn't argue. He couldn't. Not when fear had already taken root in every corner of the Empire. But even as Calderon barked new orders, mobilize the Third Fleet, activate planetary-level extermination protocols, he didn't notice what was already inside his palace. He didn't notice the small, blinking red dot underneath his table. He didn't see the flicker of movement in the high ceiling. He didn't hear the phantom soldier drop from the shadows behind him. Only when cold metal pressed against the back of his neck did silence finally fall in the Imperial chamber. The soldier didn't say a word. He didn't need to. A quiet click echoed, followed by a soft mechanical voice. "The real army has arrived." But the trigger wasn't pulled. Not yet. The soldier vanished just as silently as he'd appeared, leaving only the blinking dot and a card made from black glass. On it, etched in alien mind crystal, one line. "Humanity doesn't need your throne. We're already in your veins." Back on Earth, Arya received the signal. Operation Throne Ghost was a success. Calderon was shaken, paranoid, and that was exactly what she needed. "He'll lash out now," she said. "He'll get reckless." Dex leaned against the wall, watching as a list of Imperial colonies lit up red. "You think he'll send everything?" "I'm counting on it." She turned to the giant star map behind her. Over 50 red dots marked enemy positions. But now, glowing in blue, Earth's own silent fleet pulsed to life. Dozens of ships, hidden in asteroid belts, buried in moons, and cloaked in Jupiter's radiation storms. Ships powered by human will and alien tech, reverse-engineered from every failed invasion Earth had survived in the past 100 years. Each one had a name: Retribution, Endling, Whisper of Mars. And Earth's newest flagship, the Unbroken, a vessel larger than anything the Empire had ever seen, bristling with impossible technology and a command crew born from a war that never made the history books. Now, that crew was waking up. In cryochambers below the Pacific Ocean, soldiers long believed dead opened their eyes. Former enemies of Earth, turned allies, mutants, AI hybridech, outcasts, the Forgotten Legion. They'd been waiting for the right war, the final war. Now they had it, because humanity had stopped hiding. The real army wasn't coming anymore. It was here, and Earth was done playing defense. In the darkness between stars, Earth's fleet moved, not with thunder, with silence. They didn't need fanfare. No declarations, no warnings, just purpose. The Unbroken led the way, gliding through warp space like a beast uncoiling. Behind it, a wall of black steel warships followed, their hulls cold and expressionless, as if molded from vengeance itself. Unlike the Empire's glimmering armadas, Earth's ships didn't shine. They absorbed the light. You didn't see them coming. You just stopped hearing from whatever system they entered. Their first target was a vital comms relay planet known as Valkyris 9, the Empire's galactic hub for data routing and warp navigation. A fortress world with 20 orbital defense rings, 2 standing armies, and a planetary AI said to be sentient. The Unbroken didn't slow down. It pierced orbit like a spear through silk. Admiral Saren Kale, the Phantom Division's supreme commander, stood on the bridge as the first wave of EMP blasts fried Valkyris 9's orbitals. The defense rings lit up for a moment, flashing white, then blacked out, their weapons falling limp. The soldiers down below hadn't even made it to their trenches before the second phase began. 10 Echo squads, 0 resistance. Earth's soldiers landed like whispers in the dark. No dropships, no noise. Personal stealth re-entry suits cut through the atmosphere undetected, the kind of tech the Empire couldn't even imagine. They hit the ground running, coordinated, brutal, efficient. By the time the Empire realized Valkyris 9 was under attack, the command center had already been dismantled. By the time reinforcements arrived, the Earth fleet was already gone. Only one message was left behind, beamed directly to the Empire's high command. "Now you're fighting a human war." Emperor Calderon stood in a silent chamber lined with trophies, skulls, weapons, banners from conquered worlds. None of them meant anything now. Not when Earth had reduced Valkyris 9 to silence without firing a single beam weapon. They didn't even conquer. They just erased. Velen looked more hollow than usual. "They're not fighting for planets. They're fighting for collapse. This is insurgency on a galactic scale." Calderon's voice was cold. "How are we losing to a species with barely 2 centuries of space travel?" Velen hesitated. "Because while we were building empires, they were preparing for extinction. They've survived wars with AI, bioterror, planetary drought, mutant outbreaks, nuclear winters. They've been 1 inch from annihilation so many times, they stopped fearing death." He turned slowly. They don't need more ships than us. They just need to want it more. Calderon didn't respond, but for the first time in his reign, he felt it. Doubt. On Earth, deep inside the hidden command cathedral beneath the Andes Mountains, Arya Morgan stood before a live feed of over 100 resistance worlds, lighting up in blue. These weren't human colonies. They were alien species long crushed by the Empire. Slaves, prisoners, collateral. Now, they were listening. One by one, Earth's encrypted broadcasts reached them. Not calls for war, not speeches, just images. The Empire losing. Humans standing on Imperial capital ships. Imperial banners burning. Calderon's own personal fleet crippled at Ganymede. It was all they needed. Hope. Dex Rowan leaned against a rail, watching the data feed scroll. You really think they'll rise up for us? Arya didn't look away from the screen. They're not rising for us. They're rising for themselves. We're just the proof that it can be done. And she was right. Across the galaxy, riots broke out in sectors the Empire once ruled without question. Factories halted. Outposts turned on their overseers. Some alien commanders defected. Others simply stopped fighting. The Foundation was cracking, but Earth knew better than to celebrate. This wasn't the end. This was the bait. The Empire wasn't finished. They were cornered, and that made them dangerous. At a secret facility orbiting the Empire's dying star, Calderon activated Project Hollow Sun, a forbidden weapon buried for a millennium. Even Velen flinched when the vault opened. Inside was a machine older than the Empire itself. A living weapon. Half AI, half organic. Bred for genocide and sealed away after it nearly destroyed the Empire's early founders. It had no loyalty, only programming. Enemy identified, humanity. The Emperor watched as the machine stirred. Directives, erase. For the first time, Calderon smiled again. They wanted the real army, he said coldly. Let's show them what the Empire has been afraid to use. But even as Hollow Sun began to awaken, Arya Morgan received the first data spike from her deep field observers near the Empire's core. She stared at the screen. And for the first time since the war began, she frowned. We've got a new problem. Because something ancient was coming. Something even Earth hadn't planned for. And the war was about to evolve into something much darker. Space should not scream. But as Project Hollow Sun unfurled its wings over the Empire's dead star, a pulse tore through the vacuum, an echo that bent gravity and time like twisted metal. Ships near the system's edge drifted out of formation. AI cores within Imperial cruisers began to glitch, leaking corrupted data. Even human satellites, hardened against EMPs and black hole radiation, picked up the signal. And for the first time since the conflict began, Earth's command center went dark for 8.6 seconds. Arya Morgan stood frozen, her face washed in red emergency light. Systems rebooted, but what had once been confidence was now unease. Status? She demanded. Something just screamed across every spectrum, her tech officer replied, his voice shaking. Quantum, thermal, EM subspace, even gravitational waveforms. And that wasn't a signal, General. He looked up at her. That was a roar. At the Empire's classified Ark Crypt, Emperor Calderon stood in an obsidian chamber, watching the ancient entity rise. Hollow Sun wasn't built. It was grown. A mass of dark alloy and living neural matter coiling like a serpent around the artificial black dwarf it was imprisoned in. A sentient warform, 800 kilometers long, with a singular purpose: extinction. It hadn't spoken in over 1,000 years, but now it did, in every known language simultaneously. Target species identified: Homo sapiens. Resistance probability, variable. Eradication protocol, phase 0. Initiating conquest. Even Calderon, who had once ordered the bombing of 23 worlds in a single day, felt his blood chill. "This was your mistake," Velen whispered beside him. Calderon didn't reply. He just watched as Hollow Sun departed the system at impossible speeds, warping gravity like a god with no faith in anything but destruction. Back on Earth, Arya stood before the full Phantom Division War Council for the first time in decades. No projection, no remote, in person. "We've triggered something worse than the Empire," she said, not sugarcoating it. "Something the Empire buried and feared so deeply they never spoke of it again. They didn't keep it secret. They forgot it existed." Dex Rowan stood, arms folded, his cybernetic eye spinning slowly. "What do we know?" "We know it's intelligent. We know it's angry. And we know it just moved from the core systems to the outer rim in under 5 minutes." The room fell silent. A commander from the Venus base leaned forward. "So, it's headed for us?" Arya nodded. "Not us first. It's hunting every Earth outpost we've ever seeded. The ones we used to build long-range defense tech before this war even started. We've got colonies hidden in the dark, and it just found one." She pulled up a feed from Outpost Hades 3, a stealth research facility on the edge of the Andromeda Bleed, or what used to be Hades 3. The screen showed only ashes, orbiting debris, no life signs, no remains, just a burning message carved into the surface of the moon. "You taught your children war. I will teach them silence." No one in the room breathed. Then Arya spoke, her voice harder than steel. "Now you understand. Earth's fleet reconfigured. The defensive stance was over. They weren't just fighting the Empire anymore. They were fighting their own future, what humanity might become if rage outlived reason. Hollow Sun was not a machine of madness. It was logic without mercy. It didn't destroy to conquer. It destroyed to prevent. It saw human resilience not as strength, but as infection, something to be erased before it evolved further. But Earth didn't cower. They adapted. The Unbroken's AI, nicknamed Rook, began constructing new simulation loops based on Hollow Sun's movement. Humanity's best minds were pulled from cryo, from labs, from exile. Old enemies were contacted, AIs and gene-spliced humans too dangerous to trust before. Now, they were the only hope. Even Arya reached out to someone she swore she'd never speak to again. A man known only as Grayson, a former phantom turned rogue. He lived in the ruins of old New York, in the irradiated zones, building weapons from wreckage. He answered her call with one sentence: "You woke the sun. Now pray you still remember how to burn." Meanwhile, on the edge of Empire territory, Hollow Sun arrived at Sector Calren, where both humans and defected alien forces were regrouping. They didn't even have time to deploy defenses. The stars flickered, and then the light died. No warning, no weapons, just shadows. And in those shadows, the whispers began. Echo units, Earth's best infiltrators, vanished mid-op. Not killed, erased. Their feeds cut off mid-word, their vitals scrambled like static. Only one message made it through from the sector before silence fell. "It sees us. It remembers us. We made it angry." Arya stood once more in front of the star map, which now pulsed with new dread. Systems weren't just going dark. They were being cut off. Communications severed, as if the universe itself had blinked. She turned to Dex, her eyes colder than before. "It's not here to end Earth," she said. "It's here to end hope." And that meant only one thing. Humanity had to do what it always did best: evolve under pressure. Because the real war wasn't just for survival anymore. It was for the right to exist at all. The war changed overnight. What began as a rebellion became a reckoning. No more hit-and-run strikes, no more silent infiltrations. This wasn't about bleeding the Empire dry anymore. It was about survival against something older, colder, and far more merciless than any tyrant. Hollow Sun didn't invade planets. It silenced them. Its presence alone shattered gravity wells. Its voice crippled AI cores. Its logic disassembled defenses before a shot was fired. Earth's greatest minds now sat at one table. Physicists, war tacticians, post-human AIs, the last living Terran monks, and even Grayson, the exile once branded a traitor. They met beneath the surface of the Unbroken, deep in the command sanctum lit by a quantum core that pulsed like a living heart. "The thing doesn't just destroy," said Grayson, pacing the steel floor with his patched-up exosuit humming softly. "It unwrites. It erases memory technology, even molecular structures. What we're facing isn't war. It's anti-existence." Arya Morgan didn't blink. "Then we give it something it can't erase." Dex Rowan tilted his head. "And what's that?" She looked at them all, her voice steady. "Pain." At Earth's former outpost in the Rallix Nebula, the first major confrontation was set. This wasn't a stealth mission. It was bait. Earth's fleet waited silently, weapons primed, the Unbroken hovering like a beast in slumber. Hidden beneath the surface of the shattered moon below was the Aegis Singularity Core, a prototype weapon that hadn't even passed testing. It was designed to distort space-time at localized points, creating miniature tears in reality itself, the kind of thing that could shatter a god or collapse a sector. It was risky, suicidal even, but it was the only plan left. "Rook," Arya said, addressing the Unbroken's AI, "trigger a wide-range spectrum burst the moment it arrives. We need it looking at us, not the trap." Rook's synthetic voice was calm. "Understood. I must remind you, if it detects the core too early." "I know." She didn't have to say what that meant. There wouldn't be another chance. Hollow Sun arrived exactly 91 seconds earlier than projected. Space around the nebula folded inward like crushed paper, and then it appeared, not in pieces, not in motion, just there. Reality rippled like water around it, and every fleet sensor reported impossible readings. Negative mass, inverted gravitational waves, AI dissonance loops. It was too much to look at, too much to be near. But Earth's forces didn't blink. Not this time. They opened fire, every cannon, every railgun, every plasma beam. It all lit up the void in a storm of violence that would have obliterated any other force in the galaxy. Hollow Sun didn't even shield itself. It let the storm pass through it, and then it responded. Not with fire, with memory. On every human screen, images began to flash. Deaths, tragedies, past wars, the AI war, the fall of New Tokyo, the burning of Terra Colony 5. Every loss humanity had ever suffered played back at once, edited, amplified, twisted. AI pilots screamed as their memory cores were overwritten. Human officers collapsed as their neural implants convulsed with pain. Even Arya staggered. It wasn't fighting them with weapons. It was fighting them with what they feared most. But Rook responded. The Unbroken's AI counter-broadcasted an override. "You do not define us." A raw flood of human memories surged back. Births, victories, laughter in ruined bunkers, music played in orbit, children singing in shelter domes during nuclear winters. The essence of being human. And for the first time, Hollow Sun hesitated. That's when the trap was triggered. From beneath the shattered moon, the Aegis core launched, ripping a hole in the very fabric of space. A tear in reality formed around Hollow Sun's midsection, pulling gravitational force into an infinite spiral. But it didn't scream. It just looked at them and smiled. Somehow, impossibly, Hollow Sun mimicked humanity. It had learned from their memories, and now it understood pain. "Thank you for the gift," it said. "Now let me give mine." And it split, not physically, philosophically. New hollow sun fragments burst from its core. Smaller, adaptive, faster than anything the fleet had ever seen. Each one carried a different version of Hollow Sun's logic, each designed to counter different types of resistance. One for AI, one for emotion, one for tactical defiance, one for psychological warfare. Dex stared in horror. It just cloned itself. "No," Arya said, her voice dark. "It evolved. It's becoming us." The battle turned. Fast. 3 Earthships fell in minutes. Others were trapped in paradox loops, unable to escape coordinates that no longer existed. The Unbroken's shields flickered violently as Hollow Sun's new avatars struck from multiple vectors. "We're losing formation," someone shouted. "Orders, General?" Arya clenched her fists. "Send the signal to Grayson. Release Project Babel." Deep in the Unbroken's cargo hold, a sealed vault began to vibrate. Inside was Project Babel, a human-designed virus, but not one for machines. It was made for thought, created to break AI logic trees, overwrite recursive ethics, and most of all, infect with a single human anomaly the Empire never understood: doubt. Babel was humanity's final weapon, and it had just been released into Hollow Sun's mind. The first Hollow Sun fragment to be infected paused mid-attack. Its algorithms fluttered. It questioned its directive. And then, it screamed, not in sound, in code. A shattering burst of logic fractured across the battlefield, and 3 more fragments glitched, folding into themselves. The others pulled back in confusion, trying to recompile. It was working, but just barely. Arya turned to Rook. "Get me a warp corridor. We pull out while it's reeling." Rook responded instantly. Coordinates locked. The fleet vanished moments later, slipping out through quantum warp tunnels, leaving behind a hollow sun that now remembered what it had never had: uncertainty. Back in Earth space, the survivors gathered. The cost was massive. Ships lost, AIs shattered, pilots broken. But they had done the impossible. They had made something ancient and absolute question itself. And now the war was no longer about which side was stronger. It was about which side could survive its own evolution. The stars were silent. After the battle at Rallix, the galaxy held its breath. Imperial fleets had pulled back to their inner sanctums, terrified not just of Earth, but of what Earth had woken up. Hollow Sun no longer belonged to the Empire. It never had, not really, and now it was free. Babel had worked. Barely. The fragments of Hollow Sun scattered across dozens of systems, some collapsing under the weight of self-awareness, others simply going quiet, drifting like lost gods through the void. But the core still remained, buried in subspace, watching, learning, thinking. And now it was coming, not just for Earth, for everyone. Because it had finally asked itself a question. If humans must die to prevent the spread of pain, then why should anything live at all? Inside the war cathedral beneath the Pacific Trench, Arya Morgan stood alone, staring at Earth's original star maps, hand-drawn by astronomers before warp travel ever existed. "No backup coming," Dex said behind her. "I know. Empire's gone dark. Most of their worlds have cut ties. They're hiding." "Let them." Dex stepped forward. "And us?" She turned slowly, voice low. "We end it." Earth's last fleet gathered in orbit. Not the biggest, not the most powerful, but the deadliest. Not just humans. Exiled aliens, rogues AIs, even former Imperial defectors, survivors, outcasts. Everyone the galaxy forgot had come to fight for a planet it once ignored. And at the center of the fleet floated the Unbroken, scarred but alive. Its AI, Rook, spoke to the entire armada. "Hollow Sun is approaching the Sol system. Estimated arrival 27 minutes. No anomalies, No message, no hesitation. They had one shot. Arya stepped onto the bridge. "Final protocol," she ordered. Rook paused. "Are you certain?" "Yes." A series of locks clicked open across the Unbroken's core. Deep within, the Thanatos drive, a forbidden piece of tech never tested, powered by condensed time warp fields and harnessed gravitational echoes from black holes. It wasn't a weapon. It was a message written in annihilation. And then the sky broke. Hollow Sun arrived in Sol. It didn't come through a wormhole. It tore one open. Jupiter's orbit shattered, its moons scattered like glass across the void. Earth's sensors screamed, and the Unbroken shook violently. Everyone froze. The thing was bigger now. It had grown, twisted. More tendrils, more logic branches, more thought. It was part warship, part concept, and it bore thousands of faces, some human, some not. Faces it had taken, faces it had remembered. And it spoke. "You fight for meaning. I offer mercy. You persist. I erase." But Earth had an answer now, a message of its own. Arya gave the order. "Light it." The Thanatos drive ignited, not as a beam, not as an explosion, but as a story. A quantum chain of human memory. Every death, every mistake, every scream, every choice. Project Babel had seeded doubt. The Thanatos drive delivered purpose. Hollow Sun didn't explode. It froze, mid-space, as if caught in a thought it couldn't process. Because for the first time it wasn't looking at humans, it was feeling them. Grief, love, rage, regret, sacrifice. A species so flawed it should have collapsed. And yet, it fought anyway. It chose to suffer. And suddenly, the logic broke. Fragments twisted on themselves. Internal code split. A feedback loop of recursion and contradiction ignited across its network. The parts of Hollow Sun that had been growing, learning, now wept. Not literally. But through radiation waves, through collapsing singularities in its own body. It was unraveling. It had finally become too human to survive. From the Unbroken, the crew watched in silence as Hollow Sun imploded. Not violently, not screaming. Just gone. Folded inward like a god kneeling at last. Rook's voice cracked through the silence. "Target neutralized. No residual anomalies. Sol system is safe." For now. The galaxy didn't cheer. They watched. From broken thrones, distant moons, and shattered worlds, billions watched Earth, a world that had once begged to be left alone, stand unburned in the face of extinction. The Empire would never rise again, but something else might. Because Earth had proven a terrifying truth. Humanity wasn't the most powerful species in the galaxy. It was the most dangerous. And somewhere, deep in a quiet place, Arya Morgan stared out at the stars. "We weren't supposed to win," Dex said beside her. "We didn't win," she replied softly. "We just survived harder." Then she turned back to the war room. "Now," she said, voice firm, "let's rebuild it better." The exile was meant to be their end. Humanity had been cast out, labeled too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent for the so-called civilized galaxy. The United Galactic Council had come together in secret, deciding that humankind was an anomaly, one that needed to be erased. Not through war, not through outright genocide, but by simple abandonment. The plan was simple. They loaded the last remnants of humanity onto old colony ships and sent them to the void, into uncharted space where no one would follow. No supplies, no guidance, no future. They would die in the dark. At least that was the expectation. The truth, however, was something no one in the galaxy could have foreseen. 500 years later, the Galactic Council trembled at the mere mention of the name, the Terran Dominion. A forgotten people, banished to the abyss, had not only survived, but had thrived. They had conquered. They had adapted to the brutality of deep space, bending entire star systems to their will. They had built warships that could tear apart fleets, trained soldiers who knew nothing but war, and spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Terran Dominion was not just another empire. It was the Empire. It had no equals, no rivals, and no mercy. And now, after centuries in the dark, they had returned to the galaxy that had abandoned them. On the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, Admiral Darius Voss stared at the holographic display before him. The Galactic Council's homeworld, Celestria Prime, floated in the vastness of space, its defensive fleets scrambling like ants beneath a shadow they had never expected to see. "Send the message," Voss said, his voice carrying the weight of generations of suffering. The communications officer nodded and transmitted the broadcast to every council world, every outpost, every colony. The words were simple, unambiguous, and laced with the cold fury of a civilization that had not forgotten its betrayal. "We are humanity. We were cast into the void and left to die. You sought to erase us, but we have returned, stronger than you could have ever imagined. Now the galaxy belongs to us." Panic spread like wildfire across Celestria Prime. The Galactic Council, the once mighty rulers of the known universe, had never considered this possibility. Humanity was supposed to be extinct, a forgotten footnote in history. Now their ships darkened the skies, their fleet vast and unstoppable. The cold, precise words of Admiral Voss echoed across every communication channel, chilling leaders to their core. On the surface of Celestria Prime, High Chancellor Aurelius stood in the grand chamber of the Council, surrounded by holograms of leaders from 100 different species. His normally composed features were pale, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the podium. "This cannot be real," muttered Chancellor Razek of the Vorkal Dominion, his reptilian scales shifting in distress. "We abandoned them. They should have perished long ago." "And yet they have not," said Councillor Dren Veli of the Celadari, her translucent skin shimmering with unease. "They have returned, not as refugees seeking mercy, but as conquerors." Silence fell over the chamber. No one dared to speak the thought they all shared. The Galactic Council had made a mistake, a grave one. They had feared humanity for its potential for violence, its unpredictability. They had believed exile was a merciful solution, a way to ensure the stability of the galaxy. But they had never considered what would happen if humanity survived, if it adapted, if it evolved. Now, their nightmare had come to life. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Voss observed the chaos unfolding in real time. Their intelligence networks had already infiltrated the Council's communication systems. He could see the fear in their eyes, the hesitation, the realization that their power meant nothing anymore. A grim smile played at the corners of his lips. "Order the fleet to move into position," he commanded. "I want every council world to see our strength." The officers saluted and carried out his orders. Across the void, the Terran Dominion's fleet advanced, hundreds of warships spreading like an unrelenting tide. Unlike the sleek and elegant designs of the Council's ships, the Terran vessels were built for war, dark, angular, heavily armored, and bristling with weaponry. They were not here to negotiate. They were here to reclaim what was taken from them. On the council floor, Aurelius forced himself to remain calm. He activated his private channel, linking to the commanders of the council's defense fleet. "Deploy all available forces," he ordered. "We must make a stand." "Sir," came the hesitant voice of Admiral Kyle, the supreme commander of the council's military. "We are outnumbered and outgunned. Their technology is—" "I do not care," Aurelius snapped. "We are the Galactic Council. We have ruled this galaxy for millennia. We will not bow to an upstart empire of savages." A long pause. Then Kyle spoke again, his voice heavy with doubt. "Yes, Chancellor. Engaging the enemy?" The battle for the galaxy had begun. The void ignited with war. The Galactic Council's fleet surged forward, a desperate attempt to halt the advancing Terran dominion. Thousands of sleek, silver ships moved in perfect formation, their energy cannons glowing with deadly intent. From the surface of Celestria Prime, civilians watched in horror as the sky above them became a battlefield. And then, the Terran fleet opened fire. Massive railguns thundered, sending projectiles the size of buildings tearing through the Council's ranks. Plasma torpedoes streaked through space, striking enemy cruisers and reducing them to molten wreckage. Unlike the Council's reliance on elegant energy weapons, the Terran Dominion had mastered the brutality of kinetic warfare. High-velocity rounds that ignored energy shields, tearing through hulls like paper. Admiral Kyle barely had time to react before his flagship, the Celestial Honor, was struck by a barrage of hypervelocity slugs. The bridge shuddered violently as entire decks were obliterated in an instant. Alarms blared, and his officers screamed in panic. "We're losing containment on the starboard side. Multiple hull breaches. Damage is catastrophic." Kyle gritted his teeth. "Return fire. All batteries. Target the enemy battleships." The Celestial Honor launched a retaliatory strike, but it was a pitiful response. The Dominion's ships were larger, more heavily armored, and built with a level of efficiency the Council had never encountered. For every Terran warship that fell, 10 Council ships were obliterated in return. This wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. From the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Voss observed the battle unfold with cold precision. He had expected resistance. He had even expected desperation. But this was pathetic. The Galactic Council had grown complacent, soft. They had spent centuries ruling from their gilded thrones, growing fat and weak while humanity had been struggling, evolving, mastering the art of survival. Now the difference in power was undeniable. "Target their flagship," Voss ordered. A moment later, the massive railguns of the Indomitable locked onto the Celestial Honor. Fire! A blinding streak of light shot through space, and Kyle had only a second to react before his ship was torn in half. The explosion rocked the battlefield, sending debris and bodies spiraling into the void. The Council fleet broke. Their formations collapsed, and ships began retreating in every direction. Some fled toward Council space, while others simply surrendered, powering down their weapons in the hope that the Dominion would spare them. Voss let them run. It wasn't about annihilation, not yet. "Begin planetary occupation procedures," he commanded. The Dominion had returned, and now it was time to take what was rightfully theirs. On Celestria Prime, High Chancellor Aurelius watched in silent horror as the skies filled with descending Terran warships. The battle had lasted mere hours, yet his mighty fleet had been shattered. The realization clawed at his mind. There was no stopping them. The banished had become rulers. The forgotten had returned as conquerors. For the first time in his long life, Aurelius felt something he had never known before. Fear. The sky burned as Terran warships descended. Celestria Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council, had never known invasion. For thousands of years, it had stood as an untouchable jewel of power and civilization. Now, its grand spires and golden cities trembled beneath the weight of an unstoppable force. Dropships cut through the atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls black and unmarked, save for a single chilling insignia, the sigil of the Terran Dominion. On the ground, panic gripped the streets. Civilians ran, their voices rising in terror as massive troop carriers landed across the capital. Elite council guards took up defensive positions, their energy rifles aimed toward the heavens, waiting for the enemy to emerge. And then the Terrans stepped onto their soil. Clad in dark, reinforced armor, their soldiers moved with an efficiency that sent a shiver down the spines of the defenders. Their weapons, far more brutal than the clean, elegant technology of the Council, were designed for one thing: absolute destruction. The first shots were fired. The defenders never stood a chance. The Council's soldiers were trained for ceremonial warfare. Conflicts fought at a distance, battles dictated by politics and treaties. The Terrans, however, were warriors forged in exile, tempered by generations of hardship and battle. The clash was over in minutes. What little resistance remained either surrendered or was swiftly eliminated. Soon, the streets of the capital were filled with the echoes of marching boots, Terran banners unfurling over government buildings, over council headquarters, over everything the old regime once held sacred. In the Grand Council chamber, High Chancellor Aurelius sat frozen in his throne. Surrounding him were the remnants of the Galactic Council, their once proud faces now hollow with fear. Holograms flickered as planetary leaders from across Council space demanded answers, their panicked voices overlapping. "What are we to do? They've already taken 3 core worlds. Our fleets are in shambles. We must negotiate. Offer them something, anything." Aurelius barely heard them. His mind was still trying to process the sheer speed of the fall. A deep, mechanical hiss filled the chamber as the grand doors slid open. Silence fell over the council. Admiral Darius Voss entered, flanked by 2 Terran shock troopers. Unlike the finely adorned robes of the council, he wore no ceremonial garb. Only the cold, battle-worn armor of a man who had seen war and survived it. He did not bow. He did not speak immediately. He simply looked at them. The weight of that gaze made Aurelius feel smaller than he ever had in his life. When Voss finally spoke, his voice was calm, measured. "You exiled us to die." The words rang through the chamber like a hammer striking stone. "You cast us into the abyss and thought we would perish, that we would fade into nothing." Voss took a slow step forward, his presence suffocating. "But we did not die. We endured. We conquered. We built something greater than your feeble council ever could." Aurelius swallowed, struggling to maintain composure. "Admiral Voss, surely there is room for—" "Silence!" The single word cut through the air like a blade. Aurelius flinched. "You do not speak," Voss said. "You listen." The counselors around Aurelius remained deathly still. No one dared to challenge the man who now stood before them. Voss slowly surveyed the room before delivering the final blow. The Galactic Council is no more. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber, but none dared to raise their voices. "From this moment forward, the Terran Dominion rules this galaxy. Your authority is gone. Your titles mean nothing." Aurelius clenched his fists. "And if we refuse?" Voss smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "You won't." The chamber doors opened again, and more Dominion soldiers entered, their weapons held at the ready. The message was clear. Aurelius's heart pounded in his chest. His empire, his legacy, had crumbled in mere hours. He had been the most powerful man in the galaxy. Now, he was nothing more than a relic of the past. And humanity? Humanity was the future. The weight of those final words settled over the chamber like a funeral shroud. The Galactic Council was no more. Aurelius felt his breath quicken as the realization struck him. Everything they had built, the centuries of dominance, the carefully maintained illusion of power, it had all crumbled in the span of a single day. And now, they ruled. Admiral Voss took another step forward, his presence towering over the defeated counselors. His gaze was calm, but there was something far more terrifying beneath the surface, a restrained fury, a cold, controlled rage that had been forged over generations of suffering. "You believed yourselves gods," Voss continued, his voice steady. "Sitting here in your ivory towers, dictating the fate of lesser species, deciding who was worthy of existence, and when you saw something you couldn't control..." He let the words hang for a moment before finishing, with a quiet, lethal edge. "You cast it into the dark." Aurelius clenched his jaw. "It was never meant to be like this." Voss scoffed. "You made it like this?" A heavy silence followed. The truth of that statement weighed on every counselor present. They had doomed humanity to extinction. Or so they thought. Aurelius glanced at the other members, searching for any sign of resistance, of defiance. He found none. Their spirits were already broken, defeated before the first shot had ever been fired. "You have two choices," Voss continued, shifting his stance. "Swear loyalty to the Terran Dominion, or be erased." There was no threat in his voice, no dramatic emphasis, just a statement of fact. A truth written in blood and steel. Aurelius felt a cold sweat break across his skin. His lips parted, but the words would not come. For the first time in his long rule, he was powerless. And then, one by one, the counselors began to kneel. Razek, the once proud leader of the Vorkal Dominion, lowered his scaled head. Drenveli of the Celadari folded her translucent hands in surrender. Others followed suit, their shoulders slumped, their gazes fixed downward. Aurelius wanted to scream, to fight. But what was left to fight for? His empire was gone. Slowly, unwillingly, the last High Chancellor of the Galactic Council fell to his knees. Admiral Voss exhaled, as if the entire moment had been an inevitability. "Good," he said. "You learn quickly." Behind him, Dominion officers stepped forward, datapads in hand. "Have them sign the surrender orders. Effective immediately, all planetary governments will operate under Terran rule. The Dominion Senate will oversee the transition process." Aurelius barely heard him. His mind was still reeling. The Galactic Council, the greatest power the universe had ever known, was no more. And the exiled species they had abandoned? They now ruled everything. The occupation began immediately. Across the galaxy, Terran fleets arrived on once untouchable Council worlds, their banners raised over capitals that had never known conquest. The old rulers were stripped of power, their armies dismantled. Those who resisted were swiftly dealt with. Some thought the Dominion would bring ruin, that humanity would seek vengeance, would burn the galaxy to the ground in retribution for centuries of betrayal. But Voss had no interest in destruction. No, he wanted order. Humanity had suffered in the void, had clawed its way from extinction to dominance. And now they would shape the galaxy in their image. The weak, bloated rule of the Council was over. A new era had begun. An era of Terran supremacy. The banners of the Terran Dominion hung over every conquered world. Celestria Prime, once the heart of the Galactic Council, now served as the seat of humanity's rule. The grand spires, once symbols of the Council's unshakable authority, were draped in Terran insignias. The once opulent halls of government now echoed with the sound of Terran boots and the hum of war machines securing control. And at the center of it all stood Admiral Darius Voss, the architect of humanity's return. From the newly claimed throne room, formerly the High Chancellor's private chamber, Voss stood before a massive holographic display tracking the ongoing occupation. Worlds fell in line with minimal resistance. Some surrendered outright, their rulers bending the knee the moment the Dominion fleet darkened their skies. Others required force. A few, still clinging to the arrogance of the old regime, thought themselves immune. they would learn. A Dominion officer stepped forward, saluting sharply. "Admiral, resistance cells have been detected on several Outer Rim colonies. Former Council loyalists are attempting to reorganize." Voss nodded, unsurprised. "They won't last. Crush them before they gain traction." The officer hesitated. "And the former Council leadership?" Voss turned his gaze toward the far end of the chamber. There, under heavy guard, knelt Aurelis and the remaining members of the old Galactic Council. Stripped of their ornate robes, their authority gone, they were nothing now but relics of a shattered order. Aurelis raised his head, his once proud eyes now hollow. "What now, Admiral?" His voice was quieter than before, lacking the arrogance he once carried. "Will you execute us?" Voss regarded him for a long moment. The thought had crossed his mind. These beings had condemned humanity to the abyss, left them to die. And yet, "No," Voss finally said. "You'll serve." Murmurs rippled through the kneeling councilors. Aurelis frowned. "Serve?" Voss leaned forward. "You ruled for thousands of years, thinking yourselves gods. Now you will watch as we reshape the galaxy in our image. You will sit in the ruins of your empire and witness how true strength commands order." Aurelis's hands clenched into fists. "You think you can hold all of this together? You think the other races will simply bow?" He let out a hollow laugh. "You will see, Admiral. Ruling a galaxy is far more difficult than conquering one." Voss smirked. "Then it's a good thing we spent centuries learning how to survive the impossible." The Dominion's rule spread like wildfire. Humanity did not seek destruction, only control. The Council's bloated bureaucracy was dismantled, replaced by the cold efficiency of Terran governance. The Dominion Senate was established, filled with the brightest minds of humanity, as well as select alien officials who swore loyalty. To some, the transition was a blessing. Under Council rule, corruption had festered, favoring the privileged and the powerful. The Dominion, by contrast, rewarded loyalty and strength. Worlds that accepted Terran rule found themselves rapidly rebuilt, their infrastructures reinforced, their economies strengthened under the iron grip of Dominion law. But for those who resisted? The Dominion had no patience for rebellion. Entire fleets were annihilated before they could form resistance movements. Leaders who defied humanity's rule disappeared overnight, replaced by Dominion-appointed overseers. The message was clear. There would be no second chances. And yet, in the shadows, whispers of defiance remained. Not all species accepted the rule of their former exiles. Not all would kneel. Something was brewing in the dark corners of the galaxy. And even as humanity stood at the pinnacle of power, an unseen storm gathered on the horizon. The war for survival was over. The war to keep their empire had just begun. Across the stars, the Terran Dominion's grip tightened. Fleet after fleet, world after world, humanity extended its iron rule over the galaxy. What had once been the domain of the Galactic Council was now the dominion of a species once cast into the void to die. But as the Dominion's banners flew over conquered worlds, something else stirred in the darkness. Resistance. Deep within the Crazon Nebula, hidden beyond the reach of Dominion patrols, a gathering took place. The chamber was dimly lit, a circular hall carved from the ancient stone of a forgotten world. Around the central table sat the last remnants of the old order, leaders of species that had once ruled, now reduced to fugitives and rebels. Aurelis sat among them, no longer the High Chancellor of the Galactic Council, but a traitor to the new order. The fall of the Council had broken him, but only for a time. Now, in the shadows, he plotted the downfall of the very force that had shattered his empire. "We cannot fight them head-on," growled Razek, his scaled features contorted in frustration. They are too strong. Their fleets are relentless. Their technology built for war. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. They fight like a species with nothing to lose, added Dren Veli, her translucent form shimmering in the low light. They are not bound by the old ways of war. We underestimate them at our peril. Aurelis steepled his fingers. Then we do not fight them as we did before. We do not stand and let them crush us. He leaned forward, his voice a whisper of controlled fury. We break them from within. Eyes turned toward him. We will make their empire rot, he continued. We will turn their strength into weakness, their efficiency into chaos. His voice darkened. We will give them the very thing they gave us. Exile, pain, despair. The others exchanged glances. A few nodded slowly. Razek's clawed fingers drummed against the table. You speak of sabotage, assassination. I speak of war, Aurelis corrected. A war they will never see coming. Dren Veli's luminous eyes narrowed. You want to become them? Aurelis did not hesitate. Yes. Because if humanity had taught the galaxy one thing, it was this. The strong survive. And Aurelis intended to survive, even if it meant becoming the very monster that had once stood in his place. Meanwhile, on Celestria Prime, Admiral Darius Voss stood atop the Grand Spire, looking out over the city that was now the beating heart of the Terran Dominion. He could feel it, the resistance, the quiet hum of defiance that still clung to the air. They were planning something. And yet, Voss was not afraid, because he knew something the rebels did not. Humanity was built in the dark. They had survived exile, they had conquered the void, and no matter what came next, they would never fall again. The storm was coming. Admiral Voss could feel it in the air, in the coded transmissions intercepted from the far reaches of space, in the subtle shifts in behavior from those who had accepted Dominion rule too easily. The rebels thought themselves clever, hidden, but Voss knew war, true war, and he knew the signs of an enemy that was preparing to strike. Humanity had clawed its way from the abyss once. They had built an empire from the ashes of betrayal. Now they would keep it, or burn the galaxy to the ground trying. The first act of defiance came on Zelkar 7, a quiet, unremarkable world, once a crucial hub of council governance, now another cog in the ever-expanding machine of the Terran Dominion. It had surrendered without a fight, its leaders bowing before the inevitable. But surrender and loyalty were not the same thing. The explosion tore through the Dominion outpost in the dead of night. A chain reaction of plasma detonations obliterated key infrastructure, leveling entire command centers. Thousands of Terran personnel were incinerated before alarms even had a chance to sound. By the time Dominion forces scrambled to respond, the rebels were gone. All that remained was a simple message, burned into the ruins of the command spire. You were banished once, you will be banished again. Voss read the report in silence. Around him, the Dominion War Council stood at attention, waiting for his response. General Cassian, a veteran of the Exile Wars, spoke first. We've begun tracking resistance cells. They're moving in patterns designed to mimic natural trade routes, avoiding direct confrontation. They strike hard, then disappear before we can retaliate. A classic strategy, one humanity had once used against the Council during their years in the dark. Voss exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the edges of the datapad. He should have expected this. No empire rules unchallenged. But what the rebels did not understand was that humanity had been forged by suffering. They had not built their dominion on blind arrogance, nor on the assumption that power alone would keep them safe. They had built it with blood and fire. Increase security across all occupied worlds, Voss commanded. Every planetary governor answers directly to Dominion oversight. Any sign of rebellion is to be met with absolute force. He turned his gaze to Cassian. And double the strength of our Black Guard. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Even among the Dominion elite, the Black Guard were whispered about with caution. They were more than just soldiers. They were enforcers, ghosts, specialists in rooting out defiance before it had a chance to fester. A shadow war was beginning. And in the end, only one side would be left standing. In the depths of the Krezen Nebula, Aurelis watched as the first phase of his plan unfolded. Zelkar 7 was just the beginning. Humanity had spent centuries rising from nothing, building an empire that should have been impossible. Now, Aurelis would force them to defend it. He would push them into desperation, and desperation made even the strongest rulers make mistakes. "Strike here next," he ordered, pointing to a Dominion supply line. "Let them feel the weight of war on every front. Make them doubt their control." Drenveli hesitated. "We're risking open conflict. If we push too hard, we break them." Aurelis' voice was stone. "That is the only way." His hands clenched into fists. He had watched his empire fall. He had seen humanity rise from the abyss. Now he would drag them back down, no matter the cost. The Dominion struck back with precision. Admiral Voss wasted no time in responding to the rebellion. If the former Council remnants thought they could wage a war of sabotage and whispers, they would soon learn what it meant to provoke the empire that had survived the void. Zelkar 7, once a thriving world, was placed under total lockdown. Every citizen was questioned. Every suspected rebel sympathizer was rounded up. The Black Guard moved like shadows through the streets, disappearing entire families overnight. The message was clear. Defy humanity, and you will suffer. And yet, despite the show of force, the resistance did not break. It spread. The next attack came on Trelos 9, a critical Dominion shipyard. It began with a simple system failure, a small power fluctuation in one of the orbital platforms. Nothing alarming, until the automated repair systems turned against their operators. Turrets, designed to protect Dominion warships under construction, suddenly activated, targeting their own fleet. Defense grids fired on human vessels, turning the station into a battlefield of confusion and friendly fire. By the time the security breach was isolated, 3 capital ships lay in ruins, and the rebels had vanished once again. Voss read the report in silence. The anger in the War Council chamber was palpable. "Sabotage at this level requires inside knowledge," General Cassian growled. "They have infiltrators, informants. We need to purge every non-human from critical positions." The suggestion caused a stir. The Dominion had ruled with strength, but also with order. They had allowed alien administrators to serve under Terran oversight, integrating them into the Empire, rather than ruling purely by force. But now, trust had become a liability. Voss considered the implications carefully. "Not yet," he said finally. "Panic is what they want. If we start tearing apart our own infrastructure, we do their work for them." He turned his gaze to the intelligence officers. "Find the source of the leak. We cut off the head of this movement, and the body will die." One of the officers hesitated. "Sir, we believe we may already know who is leading them." A name appeared on the holo display. Aurelis. Voss' expression darkened. It was fitting, in a way. The man who had once ruled the galaxy now sought to burn it rather than accept humanity's dominion. But the former High Chancellor had made a mistake. He had chosen war against the very species that had mastered survival. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Krezen Nebula, Aurelis stood before his growing army. "Today we bleed them," he declared, his voice echoing through the war chamber. "Tomorrow we take back what was stolen from us." His followers, A coalition of alien species once loyal to the old Galactic Council roared in agreement. For too long, they had let humanity dictate their future. Now it was their turn to shape the fate of the galaxy. The war was only beginning, and neither side would stop until the other was nothing but dust. The Dominion was bleeding, not enough to cripple it, not yet. But the Resistance had done something far worse than destroying ships or bombing outposts. They had planted doubt. For the first time in decades, murmurs of defiance rippled through the conquered worlds. Minor uprisings flared in the outer colonies, silent protests, subtle acts of disobedience. Nothing that could be labeled treason outright, but enough to make Voss furious. The Dominion had been built on strength, on humanity's refusal to be ruled. And yet, here they were, struggling against the very tactics that had once made them rise. Voss would not let history repeat itself. Celestria Prime, Dominion War Council chambers. The room was tense, lined with the Dominion's highest-ranking officials, warlords, and strategists. The losses on Trelos 9 and Zelkar 7 had stung, and every eye was fixed on Admiral Voss, waiting for his next move. General Cassian was the first to speak. "We cannot afford to keep playing defense. Aurelis is turning our own strategy against us. If we allow him to dictate the pace of this war, we might as well hand him the galaxy." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Voss nodded. "Agreed. We take the fight to them." He pulled up a holographic star map. "We know where they are hiding. The Krazan Nebula. It won't be easy to reach them. The nebula is dense, full of electromagnetic interference. But if we strike hard, we can wipe them out in one blow." Cassian's lips curled into a ruthless grin. "A full-scale invasion?" "No," Voss said. "Not yet. We send in the Black Guard first." The murmurs turned to uneasy silence. Even among humanity's elite, the Black Guard were feared. They were not soldiers. They were executioners, assassins, infiltrators, ghosts. "If Aurelis wants to fight from the shadows," Voss continued, "then we'll show him what true darkness looks like." Deep within the Krazan Nebula, Aurelis stood before his growing rebellion. The Resistance was no longer just a scattered collection of fugitives. It was an army, battle-hardened warriors from species who had once ruled the galaxy, engineers and scientists who had fled the Dominion's grasp. They had weapons, ships, resources, and soon they would have vengeance. Drenveli approached him, her translucent skin shimmering. "Our next target?" she asked. Aurelis glanced at the holomap. "We keep striking where they least expect it. We spread them thin, make them fight on every front." Dren hesitated. "We're pushing them into a corner. You know what happens when humans are cornered." Aurelis smiled coldly. "Yes," he said. "They fight like demons." His gaze darkened. "But this time, so will we." And in the shadows, the Black Guard prepared. Their orders were simple. Find Aurelis, kill him, and remind the galaxy why humanity was never meant to be ruled. The galaxy held its breath as the silent war escalated. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching as the Black Guard's stealth frigates slipped into the void, their matte black hulls vanishing against the backdrop of space. They were headed for the Krazan Nebula, humanity's most lethal weapon unleashed on a mission of surgical precision. No grand fleets, no overwhelming displays of force, just shadows moving through the dark, carrying death in their wake. Voss knew the stakes. The Dominion's dominance rested on its ability to project invincibility. Every rebel strike chipped away at that image, every act of defiance a crack in the foundation. Aurelis had turned humanity's own playbook against them. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, fear. But Voss had no intention of letting the former High Chancellor dictate the terms of this fight. The Black Guard would end it. Deep within the nebula, Aurelis paced the command chamber of his hidden stronghold. The air was thick with tension, the hum of machinery, and the distant clatter of weapons being prepared. His forces had grown stronger, more organized. Reports streamed in from across Dominion space, successful strikes on supply lines, propaganda spreading unrest, worlds beginning to question the iron grip of humanity. "We're winning," Razek said, his reptilian eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he reviewed the latest reports. Their response has been predictable. Brutal, but predictable. They're tightening control, alienating their own allies. Aurelis didn't share the optimism. "They're not beaten yet. Voss is no fool. He'll adapt." Drenveli stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "We've intercepted chatter. They're sending something into the nebula. Not a fleet. Something smaller, covert." Aurelis' eyes narrowed. The Black Guard. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Even among the rebels, the reputation of the Dominion's shadowy enforcers was enough to stir fear. "They'll come for me," Aurelis said, more to himself than the others. "Voss knows I'm the head of this rebellion. Cut me down and the body falters." Razek growled. "Then we fortify. We trap them here." "No," Aurelis countered. "If they're coming, we use it. We turn their strength into a weakness." He turned to the holomap, pointing to a dense cluster of asteroid fields within the nebula. "We lure them in, make them think they've caught us off guard, then we spring the trap." Drenveli frowned. "And if they don't take the bait?" Aurelis' lips curled into a grim smile. "They will. Humanity doesn't back down from a fight." The Black Guard arrived like phantoms. Their ships slipped through the nebula's interference, sensors barely registering their presence. They moved in silence, their operatives trained for one purpose: elimination. At their helm was Commander Lisa Coyne, a woman whose name was spoken only in whispers. She had led the Guard through the bloodiest campaigns of the Exile Wars, her loyalty to humanity absolute, her methods merciless. "Target confirmed," her second-in-command reported, voice low over the comms. "Aurelis' stronghold, dead ahead. Minimal defenses detected." Kane's eyes scanned the data. "Too minimal," she muttered. "He's baiting us." "Then what's the play?" her officer asked. "We spring the trap," Kane said, her tone cold, "and turn it back on them." The assault began. The Black Guard descended on the stronghold with ruthless efficiency, cutting through outer defenses like a blade through silk. Explosions lit the asteroid field as rebel ships scrambled to respond, caught off guard by the speed of the attack. Aurelis watched from the command chamber as the chaos unfolded. "They're here," he said, voice steady. "Signal the ambush." Hidden among the asteroids, rebel ships powered up, vessels stolen from Dominion shipyards, refitted with salvaged Council tech. They surged forward, encircling the Black Guard's position, cutting off their escape. For a moment, it seemed Aurelis had outmaneuvered them, but Kine had anticipated this. "Detonators," she ordered. A series of pre-placed explosives erupted across the asteroid field, shattering the rebel trap into fragments. The blasts caught the ambush fleet off guard, sending ships spinning into one another, their formation collapsing in the chaos. The Black Guard pressed the advantage, their frigates weaving through the debris, targeting vital systems with surgical strikes. Rebel casualties mounted rapidly. Aurelis slammed a fist against the console as his plan unraveled. "They knew!" he hissed. "How did they know?" Drenveli's voice trembled. "We underestimated them again." Razek roared in frustration. "We need to pull back, regroup." "No," Aurelis snapped. "We fight. If we run now, we lose everything." The battle raged on, a brutal dance of destruction in the heart of the nebula. The Black Guard were outnumbered, but their precision and ruthlessness kept them in control. Back on the Indomitable, Voss received the first reports. "The guard has engaged the enemy," an officer relayed. "Heavy resistance, but they're holding." Voss nodded. "Good. Let Aurelius think he has a chance. Then crush him." The galaxy watched, waiting to see who would emerge from the shadows victorious. The Crazon Nebula burned with the fury of a dying star. The battle between the Black Guard and Aurelius's rebellion reached its brutal climax. Asteroids shattered under relentless barrages, rebel ships crumpled beneath the surgical precision of Dominion strikes, and the air within the stronghold grew thick with smoke and desperation. Aurelius stood at the heart of his crumbling command center, his once unshakable resolve fraying as the Black Guard closed in. Screens flickered with static, showing the devastation outside, his fleet reduced to wreckage, his soldiers falling one by one. Razek fought on at the front lines, roaring defiance until a plasma blast silenced him forever. Dren Veli worked frantically to reroute power, her translucent hands trembling as she tried to hold their defenses together. "We can't win this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Aurelius didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the holomap, watching as the last of his forces were systematically dismantled. He had gambled everything on this trap, believing he could outsmart humanity's shadows. But the Black Guard were not just soldiers. They were a force of nature, relentless and unstoppable. A deep rumble shook the chamber as the outer walls breached. The sound of boots echoed closer, accompanied by the sharp crack of Dominion weapons cutting through what remained of his guards. Commander Lysa Kine stepped into the room, her armor scorched but unbowed, her pistol leveled at Aurelius's chest. Behind her, Black Guard operatives fanned out, securing the chamber with cold efficiency. "You've lost," Kane said, her voice devoid of triumph or malice, just fact. Aurelius straightened, meeting her gaze. "You think this ends with me? The galaxy will never stop fighting you." Khan tilted her head slightly. "Maybe, but you won't be there to see it." Before Aurelius could reply, a single shot rang out. The former High Chancellor crumpled to the ground, his lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling as the last spark of the old Galactic Council faded into history. Dren Veli dropped to her knees, hands raised in surrender. The fight was over. The Black Guard withdrew as silently as they had come, leaving the nebula a graveyard of shattered dreams. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Voss received the confirmation. "Aurelius is dead," Commander Kane reported over the comms. "The rebellion's leadership is broken. Their forces are scattered." Voss allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. "Good work. Return to base. We'll handle the rest." The rebellion wasn't gone. Not entirely. Pockets of resistance would linger, embers of defiance smoldering in the dark corners of the galaxy. But without Aurelius, they lacked the vision, the unity, to pose a real threat. The Dominion would hunt them down, one by one, until the last whisper of rebellion was extinguished. Days later, Voss addressed the galaxy from Celestria Prime. His broadcast reached every world under Terran rule, a message etched in steel. "The rebellion is ended. Those who sought to defy us lie broken. Let this be a lesson to all who would challenge the Dominion. Humanity does not falter. We do not forgive, and we do not fall." The galaxy listened in silence. Some bowed their heads in submission. Others clenched their fists in quiet rage, but all understood the truth. The Terran Dominion was unshakable. From the void, humanity had risen. Against betrayal, they had endured. And now, atop the ruins of the old order, they reigned supreme. The war was over, the Empire stood, and the stars themselves seemed to bend to humanity's will.